Hosting services for fctv.org are provided by MegaNet Communications. MegaNet offers a wide array of internet services, including Mega Backup Cloud Service, server colocation, T1, fiber, Metro Ethernet, as well as telephone services such as hosted PBX and digital voice. Their number one goal is to keep your communications network up and running and allow you to focus on growing your business. 877-634-2638 or meganet.net.
Proudly serving the New England area, K&K Talent Partners provide a personalized approach to full-cycle recruiting services.
Their level of integrity and empathy is rare, and it speaks volumes about who they are as people and as recruitment partners.
Our goal is to build trusted relationships and to create genuine connections that help companies grow.
K&K Talent Partners, kktalentpartners.com.
At Martha's Vineyard Bank, we know Falmouth, with locations in Woods Hole, on Palmer Avenue, and the Village Green. We deliver personal banking tailored to your needs, business solutions to help you grow, flexible lending to move you forward, and investment strategies that work for you. Whatever brings you in, we're your local partner. Martha's Vineyard Bank, your goals, our guidance.
Falmouth Select Board Chair Bob Miscali and Town Manager Mike Rinshaw are recapping Select Board meetings on FCTV's newest series, Select Board Report. Watch new episodes of Select Board Report Thursdays, live at 5, at fctv.org or on YouTube. Have a question about what happened at the last Select Board meeting? Ask our host by visiting fctv.org/watch/SBR.
You can watch this from home.
Okay, good evening. Now that Mr. Netto arrived, we can start the meeting. It is 6:30, and I'm going to call to order the Town of Falmouth Select Board meeting for Monday, April 27th, 2026. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you. At this point, I'll just remind everyone to silence your cell phone, notify the chair if you are making a video or audio recording of this open session meeting. The placement and operation of the recording equipment should not interfere with the conduct of the meeting. Our first item is recognition. And I would just like to congratulate the Friends of the Falmouth Bikeway. They put on a wonderful celebration on Saturday. Many of us were there. Congressman Keating was there, Senator Fernandez, Rep. Moakley, and a lot of people. And there'll be another celebration at some point in the month of May as well. So, and I think others here were able to spend some time on Saturday with the Falmouth Cultural Council. I know Mr. Richardson was there, and I think, Heather, you came as well. They had their annual grant award discussion and doing a wonderful job. A lot of very worthwhile grantees. So, anyone else have any recognition?
I would like to recognize Falmouth High School's Regal Seagulls. Their robotics team, currently only in its second year, go into Worlds in a couple of days. So they have been just killing it at every competition they go to. They keep getting the up-and-comer, newcomer awards, and it's really fun to see both the success they're having and the team spirit.
Thank you. As far as announcements, I think everyone is probably aware or has seen that there will be a rollout of trash bins coming in May. I was at the SWAC presentation this afternoon at 4 o'clock at the Herman Room. There's another one going on this evening at 7, and I believe there will be further forums going forward to let people know about the rollout, no pun intended. And there's also a lot of information on the website, so please consult the website. If you have any questions, certainly reach out to either Alan Robinson or Mary Ryther at the town. Anyone else for announcements?
Sure. There's a great conference going on tomorrow and Wednesday at Falmouth High School in the small gym, not actually interfering with school operations. I believe you can still register. It's called Big Blue and Green Tomorrow, and it's Blue Economy and Climate and Environment for 2 days, all the local folks involved. So.
Okay, Mr. Renshaw, town report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a few updates and reports. I wanted to let the board and the community know, we'll be posting this on the website as well, that the Commonwealth Energy Facility Siting Board today released a notice, and if you'll allow me, I'll read it real briefly, give an overview, and then some important dates. NSTAR Electric Company, doing business as Eversource, has requested that the Energy Facility Siting Board, or the Siting Board, grant individual and comprehensive zoning exemptions from the Town of Falmouth's zoning bylaw to replace the existing Falmouth tap switching station located at 228 and 280 Sam Turner Road in Falmouth with a new transmission and distribution substation. Project description and map are included in this notice, and as I mentioned, I'll include the entire bulletin notice on the website. Importantly, the Siting Board will conduct a public comment hearing with both in-person and remote participation options on Thursday, May 14th, 2026 at 6 p.m. The in-person hearing location will be the Lawrence School Auditorium, 113 Lakeview Avenue. Remote attendees, and there's a link to participate via a Zoom link, can also participate that way if they're not able to attend in person. And again, I'll post this Zoom link on the town's website. Importantly, Mr. Chair and Select Board, to provide oral comments during the public comment hearing, either in person or in Zoom, the Siting Board is requesting that an email be sent to sitingboard.filing@mass.gov. There's a subject line. Siting Board also invites written comments on the project. Written comments would be useful to the Siting Board if submitted by Friday, May 29th. Persons or groups who wish to be involved in the Siting Board proceeding beyond providing comments at the public comment hearing or in writing may seek an interview as a party or participant as a limited participant. And again, Mr. Chair, I'll post this on the website tomorrow so folks have direct access to that Zoom link. Also wanted to mention, and this is exciting, with regards to a request for proposal that was just issued earlier this month on April 15th. This is an RFP and legal notice for the all-inclusive multi-generational play space project, as you recall, off Palmer Avenue, Goodwill Park. The RFP closes on May 15th, so we're hoping we get some really great proposals for that project. This afternoon, Peter, the Assistant Town Manager, and I attended the Juneteenth planning celebration. Wanted to push out a couple of dates that are not too far off. On Saturday, May 16th, beginning at 7 p.m., registration anyway, they're having the Opal Lee's 2.5-mile walk. As some of you may know, this walk is inspired by Opal Lee, the grandmother of Juneteenth, who walked 2.5 miles in honor of the delayed emancipation of enslaved African Americans in Texas. It took 2.5 years, as I understand, for the notice of the emancipation to travel to get to Texas and for that full emancipation to occur. So we're encouraging everybody to come out and walk that 2.5 miles in recognition of Opal Lee 2.5 mile day.
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating the date?
Yes, Saturday, May 16th. And there's a check-in beginning at 7 a.m. and the walk actually begins at 8. It's going to start here at Town Hall and go up Walker Street down to Surf Drive and then make that 2.5 mile circuit back. It's going to be kind of a guided tour, as I understand. There's going to be some folks that walk around and kind of walk along with the group and explain, kind of give a history lesson, if you will, of the event. Leashed pets and strollers are welcome to join. And again, we'll be posting that information on the town's website. I also wanted to mention Juneteenth celebration. Last year's was my first. It was a great celebration, if you all recur. This year is Friday, June 19th from 1 to 4 p.m. at St. Barnabas Church, 91 Main Street. And we'll also post this notice on the website. And lastly, And this is exciting, and I think Peter McConerty, the DPW director, is here. I want to thank Peter and his staff, Lawrence Lynch, the contractor, and let's give credit where it's due, Eversource, for their assistance on the Surf Drive parking lot. If you haven't seen it already, I'd encourage you to go by, take a look. They finished up the striping and all of the other improvements associated with Surf Drive parking lot, and it's looking really great on April 27th in advance of beach season. So we're really grateful. Thank you, Peter, for all your work on that. Mr. Chair, that's all I have.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Moving on to public comment. I'll remind anyone if there is public comment, if there is, so I'm going to mention public comment may be made on routine matters not on the agenda this evening. Comments are limited to 2 minutes. Please introduce yourself, and since the matter has not been included on the agenda, the Select Board may not participate in the discussion of the topic. Ms. Schneider? Perfect.
So I'm here tonight as the last time you'll be seeing me come to speak about the dog park. But after 15 years of being at the helm, it is finally time for me to be able to hand this over to a younger generation and let them take charge. We have grown. I wanted to come tonight and say thank you to the town because you believed in the experiment of a dog park. There was only one in southeastern Massachusetts when we approached the town on this. One was in Provincetown. And you said, go for it. And we worked so hard to make this work. And we were exemplary enough that almost every town on the Cape now has one. And it is really, it does my heart good to see over 30,000 dogs coming to the park every year. But more importantly, it has been an exercise in finding out that humans really needed this place as a safe place to find a friend, a place to find a companion when they didn't have one during the pandemic, and a place for dogs to be able to really learn how to socialize and to also have people learn how to have a dog. So I just wanted to thank the town. I wanted to show you that this will be hanging there, but this is all the places in town that have supported and helped the dog park over this last 15, actually 17 years if you include the 2 years it took us to build it. And I hope you'll read what I wrote on this letter. It kind of goes over, it was kind of interesting to go back and remember that on the day we opened, May 1st, 2011, that was the day Obama announced that we had been able to eliminate bin Laden. That seems a very long time ago, and that was the same time. So please, thank you again. Please do give Brooke Raymond and Scott McGann your support as they take over. Yes, it's two people replacing me, but that's because they are both working people and I wasn't. So I'm handing the keys over to Brooke tonight. And that's it. Now you're going to only hear from me on the ospreys and the beaches and town meeting.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, excuse me. Moving on to the consent agenda, I'll turn this over to Mr. Renshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Was there a particular item on consent that you wanted to review? You just want me to read the titles into the record?
You want to just, yeah.
Okay.
Just the title ones, please.
All right. Mr. Chair, first on the consent agenda under licenses, consider a vote to approve applications to renew seasonal common victualler license pending issuance of 2026 food service establishment permits, and the following licenses renewing for the period of 5/1/2026 through 4/30/2027. And Mr. Chairman, the second item under consent licenses is consider a vote to approve the application by Falmouth Beach Hotel Realty Trust, LLC, Beach Breeze Inn, 321 Shore Street, to renew its lodging house license pending approval of the 2026 certificate of inspection due to active construction. A request is also being made to change the license name from the Beach Breeze Inn to Shore Haven Inn.
Move approval of items 1 and 2 on the consent agenda.
Okay. Second? Okay.
So moved.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the presentation discussion of the operating capital and debt forecast models. I'd just like to say a few words. Every member on the select board has heard Mr. Renshaw's comments with respect to what we're looking at, and we all know that we're facing some challenges going forward with respect to our operating capital budgets. But I want to particularly thank Mr. Reed, Member Reed, for what he has given us. His memo is part of our discussion this evening, and I want to personally thank him for kind of taking the lead on this and bringing it to us. So, Mr. Reed, you have a few words for us?
Yeah, thank you. First, a big thank you for making this a priority, for fielding my memo, the requests for info, perhaps the repeated emails, and sometimes my naive questions and tax forecasts. As the main culprit, I'll take responsibility for the challenging questions that we have to ask as a group ahead, because we have a lot of work ahead. At the very premise, it's can we afford this? Can our taxpayers afford this? I started doing some research and some more analysis of just my time on this board, albeit very limited, comparatively speaking to, especially in my right here, Mr. Brown. But we need more time. We need to ask some hard questions about the data. And we need to tackle some of these projects that past generations have passed on to us, and now it's in our laps, and the buck is kind of stopping here. This is not necessarily anything that we brought upon ourselves, but now we are seeing with the good forecasting that town management has done that we have a real big math problem. I know I asked for 12 months of meetings, and I know that was not realistic, but it's the North Star of where I think we need to get to as a group. We spend very little time on a very, very large budget, but, kind of tongue-in-cheek, everyone else is asking for the stars in their capital requests. Why not, limit ourselves here? We need to ask for the stars. So in that, just a little bit about the time. We don't spend a lot of directed, concerted time on the budget as a group. We're given 15 days by the charter to personally review the budget and ask questions. But after that, we're given less than 120 minutes of meeting time to go over something that is extremely large in the hundreds of millions of dollars. We're given 15 minutes to talk about the policy for the year ahead, 20 minutes to, and obviously we run over times, but I'm just talking about what's listed in the agendas. 20 minutes to receive the presentation, 15 minutes to discuss and consider a vote to transmit it to the Finance Committee, and what does transmitting even mean and who defines that. 40 minutes to go over the operational budget requests and recommended for funding. That's later in the year, and 20 minutes finally to review and discuss the budget recommendations. So 120 minutes for $265 million. So I'm hoping that this is the first of many to help us really get at some of the critical components here. So big kudos to the finance team and town management for putting this together. I think it's a great start. As Mr. Johnson-Staub noticed, we're facing substantial challenges, and the call for a comprehensive analysis and dialogue are on point. I think the operating forecast in this packet is really good. I think the debt forecast is good. The free cash capital improvement projects is good. The combined model is good. These are exactly what towns like Lexington, Massachusetts did not do. They did not fully operationalize this before making their final major decisions. You're also in this documentation especially showing the deficits, and to Mr. Renshaw, we have been doing this, you have been doing this, and I think that's critical for transparency, so good job. We started showing tax impacts. I think that is essential for public trust for us as a group moving forward. And you're acknowledging the uncertainty and the risk. I think it was page 12, right? There's a lot of things happening in the world that we can't control, and I think that's both honest and necessary. But what we're missing, from my point of view, is the tax burden rate on the median household and their ability to incur what we are asking and or forecasting. And I think that extends to the tax burden rate on the median household of our major employers and employment sectors. Because can the town staff, can our emergency personnel, can our teachers, can our science and tech, can our healthcare, can our travel and tourism sector absorb these forecasted tax hits? I'm not sure. So we have to figure out a maximum taxable burden, the maximum override capacity over time, and start linking the capital and operational impacts. Again, I'm in my memo, and sorry for the length of this, there's a lot here. I pointed to Lexington, Massachusetts. They approved a $600 million school, and then they had to cut over 100 staff to meet the budget shortfall in the short term. I'm not saying we're heading in that direction, but their mistake was not building the school. It was their failure to align capital decisions, operating budgets, and a tax strategy. They got caught in between. And towns all around us are starting to feel the effects of the budget deficits caused by Prop 2.5 and the limitations there, and what's happening with interest rates and inflation. So I think the most important shift that we need to make as a team is to move from what happens if we continue on this path to one that is, we have to choose. Do we avoid tax increases and cut services the way Lexington did? Do we maintain services and raise revenue with tax overrides, economic growth, and raising fees? That's something we have to decide. Or do we do a hybrid that moderates the overrides, slows down capital, and adds some efficiency? I think with the data that we've been given here at the very start, we're going to get to that eventually. I don't think we'll get there tonight. But success should be defined for us as an affordability framework, again, for our critical mass here. An agreement to potentially discuss and reclassify our capital improvement projects. Making a commitment to integrate our operating and our capital budgets, and building a direction and a strategy for our override schedule. I think we need a 20 or 30-year financial and tax model outlook. We need to see not only what impacts are going to be next year, but in the years ahead, so that we can potentially impose constraints, budgetary constraints, maybe force reprioritization, align capital, and be explicit about taxes, because again, it's about being open, honest, and transparent. I in no means am a knowledge-based expert. But I think together we can put our heads together and minds together to help Falmouth get through this really big challenge, because we have an operating deficit, we've noted that, and it's only going to get bigger. And then we have some serious, and this is to Mr. Brown's point, capital improvement projects on an annual basis and much longer. We have to do our homework to really determine what is a must-have, what can be resized or not, what is a flexibility that we can do, or what is something that we have to put off. Because there's a lot on our docket, and I'm not sure that, I am not confident with the data that we have been given so far and that we have collectively analyzed together, that we have the data necessary to go forth to our taxpayers and say, sorry, we're going to have to raise your taxes $1,000 over the year. I put this as a projection. It's not true yet. And that's my concern. That outlines the memo, that outlines here, that outlines the questions, and I want to end on a positive note. Thank you for taking this first step with us.
Okay. And thank you for your work on this. Just a couple of things. As far as I can see, we're not in an operating deficit at this point. We balanced the budget thanks to the good work that Mr. Renshaw and his team did. I just want to mention, and I appreciate you for focusing on this, but actually we need to thank Mr. Renshaw, because he directed us to this problem 8 or 10 months ago and got us realizing that while right now we're balanced, we're looking at some options and some challenges going forward, and I don't think anyone has decided what that what that is, what options we're going to choose, whether we're going to have overrides or anything like that. Everything's on the table, but I certainly appreciate all that you did, Mr. Reed, to focus it. So I'm going to turn to Mr. Renshaw to give us an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Select Board Member Reed, fantastic comments. Thank you for those. Select Board, during my FY27 budget presentation to this board way back on December 15th, I discussed with the board our 5-year operating budget forecast and the need to begin what I called at that point a series of very crucial conversations or meetings with both the Select Board and the community following April town meeting. Tonight's meeting is the first of those meetings, so it is the first step, as Select Board Member Reed mentioned. Tonight, the Finance Director will be presenting very detailed deep dive into the forecasting information on the operating budget, forecast, and the debt-funded and free cash-funded capital projects and the tax implications of those. She's going to take the first, perhaps, 2/3 of the presentation going into those. She'll start with some basic definitions and discuss some assumptions and methodology work that she prepared. As you all recall, back in that meeting on December 15th, the very last slide, I presented that 5-year forecast where it showed those deficits, and they were substantial. In hindsight, I wish that I had provided some additional context. It caused quite the fallouts, and rightfully so. They were significant numbers, but without context, I think it was I did a bit of a disservice. In the month since, Laura and Peter and the finance office staff have done a great job, I feel, in preparing some of the details, and we're going to dive into those tonight. Again, I want to thank Select Board Member Reed for his vision and the work that he performed when he submitted his March 31st memo concerning the budget review and approval and his outline to achieve fiscal stability. Again, thank you very much for the work you put into that. Although there were some methodology errors in Appendix 4 concerning tax implication calculations, it really does form a strong foundation for tonight's discussion and will be the kind of cornerstone of future presentations and meetings that we have, not only with the Select Board, but with the entire community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura to go through the first 8 or 9 slides. Again, she's going to start with some basic definitions, talk about assumptions and methodology, and then go into some of the deep analysis of the financial forecast. Laura?
Okay, so as Mike just said, we're going to talk about basic definitions and go through the first 4 items, which is to review the operating budget in detail, the debt forecast in detail, the cash-funded CIP in detail, and then we're going to just look at the combined the forecast that combines all 3, but we'll be sort of flipping back and forth between that a little bit, so I can show you when I make some changes in some of the assumptions, how that impacts everything. So for definitions, basically a forecast is a projection using assumptions. It's not a sure thing. It is using assumptions and the best available knowledge that we have at a given point in time, and any historical information that's available that's relevant to the particular items of the forecast. So I want to make that very clear because this is as of a point in time. I can tell you that already information has come in related to the fiscal year 27 capital budget that departments are starting to prepare together that has already impacted these. There is now. Okay. An operating budget is the annual cost of providing services and other fixed costs that we have every year, including any principal debt repayment and related interest expense for that debt that has been authorized and issued. In Falmouth, the annual operating budget is approved by town meeting in April, and it includes everything but capital projects expense. It's funded from recurring revenues, and what we mean by that is your taxes, your local receipts, state aid, and then occasionally other available funds. Capital projects, there's a long-term investment of $25,000 or more that creates or improves physical assets, such as buildings, infrastructure, vehicles, equipment. It's funded from non-recurring revenues, and for us, that's certified free cash, sometimes reappropriations from projects that were finished and we didn't need all the money that was there, grants, and debt. In Falmouth, we have a 10-year capital improvement plan, a rolling 10-year capital improvement plan, and that's a comprehensive list of planned capital improvements or needs funded from cash and borrowing. And then the one-year capital budget that is presented to town meeting in October or November every year is for 1 year, and that's approved, as I said, by town meeting and authorizes the spending for those particular projects. Okay. Debt, well, for governments, for the most part, debt comes from issuing bonds, and it's borrowing money that has to be repaid along with interest expense for most issuances over the life of the bond. So if we issue bonds for a 30-year project, we have to pay the principal every year and the interest every year. And all debt, whether it's exempt, non-exempt, short-term, all debt needs to be repaid. I know that seems obvious, but it's not always obvious to people, which is why I'm stating it. Exempt debt means that the cost of the annual debt service, the principal and interest, may be added to the tax rate outside the limits of Proposition 2.5. And it has to be authorized by 2/3 vote at town meeting and by general ballot in an election. Non-exempt debt means that the principal and interest can only be repaid within the limits of Proposition 2.5. So that 2.5% increase to the base that we do pretty much every year would have to cover that debt service. There's a separate line for debt that's been approved for override, essentially, that is added below below the line for base taxes. And that can exist for the life of the bond that it's covering. And it's for the debt service, only for the amount of annual debt service in a given year for that particular bond. Okay. And as I said, annual debt service has to be raised and appropriated each year. Once the debt is issued, that goes into the operating budget as an appropriation. And exempt debt may be able to be done outside of Proposition 2.5. Okay, sorry, just went back. All right, an operating override allows for an approved amount of revenues to be raised outside of Proposition 2.5 for operating expenses. It's a permanent tax increase. That means it rolls over into the base tax levy in the next year, and every year going forward, you have that increase in your levy. Has to be approved by town meeting and approved by voters at the ballot. A debt exclusion is the annual debt service on the bond to be paid from property tax revenues above the levy limit for the life of the bond. That means that you put the money into your budget as an expense in your debt service expense lines, and you can also add it after Proposition 2.5 cuts off on your tax levy. Has to be, those amounts are sent to the state every year, and they have to approve that was what happened, or that those are allowed. All right, so this is just briefly how we came up with the operating budget forecast methodology. So we took the current budget, which in this case, the most recent approved current budget is for fiscal year 2027, beginning on July 1st, 2026, and running through June 30th, 2027. Town meeting just approved that in April. We grouped it into broad categories of similar type items, and some examples are there: wages and salaries, operating expenses that historically increase about the same amount each year, benefits, and there's a handful of other lines as well, which you'll see when we get into the budget, or the forecast. Then we added a percentage increase factor, or an inflation factor, to each category based on what we know from the last few years of history, general knowledge, and economic factors. For revenues, we used the broad revenue categories that are in the budget that town meeting adopts every year. Those are taxes, local receipts, state aid, and other available funds, which are mostly receipts reserved for appropriation. Once you get that, you've got total revenues minus total expenditures gives you your surplus or deficit in a given year. The forecast that I'm going to show you allows for inflation factors to change by category. It also allows us to plug in any kind of operating override and what the impact of those things are on the total numbers in the forecast. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to talk briefly about the debt and free cash funded CIP forecast as well. So free cash, we took the CIP that was handed out to town meeting in 2025, November 2025. We took every item in there that we knew was going to have to be funded with debt. That doesn't mean these projects have been approved, but it does mean it's in our 10-year CIP, and we took those items and we calculated the debt. I have any type of bond issue, we have actually spreadsheet, a large, ugly spreadsheet that calculates what the debt service will be with various assumptions. And we did that for every one of those projects, and that's how we came up with the debt projections. The free cash funded CIP basically did the same thing. Took the 2025 CIP, we already pulled out everything for the debt, so whatever was left primarily is going to have to be funded through certified free cash. Certified free cash means that DOR, the Department of Revenue, has essentially approved that as our certified free cash. They've certified it, and it is available for appropriation. In Falmouth, most of our capital is funded through the use of certified free cash. We budget to make sure that there is certified free cash because we do our budget for capital differently than we do at a different time frame than we do our budget for operations. So in November, we need to know what that certified free cash is, and we will generally have that number by the end of September in a given year. Okay. This is just a graph of what we're going to see on the debt forecast. Now you can see that the blue is the current debt. Pink is debt that has been approved. That means by town meeting and or the voters if applicable, but we have not issued it yet. And the green is the projects and the projected debt service related to those projects that we pulled out of the 10-year CIP. And then the next graph shows you the free cash funded capital that was in the 2025, in November 2025, the CIP. So you can see that we had, we'll talk a little bit later about a potential free cash policy, but we're assuming that 15 million, assuming we get 15 million, assuming we get 20 million of certified free cash, we would set the ceiling for the use of free cash in the 10 years, in the capital project budget at a level of 15 million. So the black line, or the blue line, is everything over that. The pink line is the 15 million ceiling that we're looking at right now. And I will tell you that's a little aggressive, but as I said, we'll have to make sure that we can come up with a policy that makes sense.
Can we ask questions now or afterwards?
Absolutely, you can, and I'm actually gonna have to get out of this for a minute and close it down. So
I just have one, and then, Mr. Reed, when you say that it's aggressive, I assume you mean the 15 million annually for free cash as being what's aggressive.
right, so we would recommend, we're going to recommend that whatever the certified free cash number is, that 5 million of it be held and used for any emergencies or situations that come up at the April town meeting.
Snow removal.
Snow removal is a great example.
Too soon.
Or even if you don't have an emergency, it could just be put into one of the stabilization funds, or just held as free cash, and it would roll essentially over to the next year's free cash. But in order to get to a $15 million ceiling for free cash in your CIP, you've got to come in with $20 million of certified free cash each year. Now, we've been able to do that the last couple of years, but prior to that, we did not reach those levels. So if certified free cash comes in at $17 million, then we would say we really should hold the amount that we're funding in capital to $12 million. So we have that $5 million in reserve for emergencies that come up during the course of the year.
Okay, Mr. Reed?
I think you just touched on it a little bit, but what's the volatility of the free cash?
Well, so free cash, there's quite a few factors that go into that calculation, but for the most part, most free cash comes from revenues coming in higher than we're budgeted, and expenditures coming in lower than we're budgeted. And so we budget local receipts. We prefer to budget at about 80% of prior year actuals. So because we know we need free cash to fund our capital. That's the reason that Falmouth does that.
So if I can just piggyback one more on this one, we're lucky that we have this free cash. We're lucky the last few years we've got so much in. It seems to be the basis of our annual capital improvements and emergencies, right? So by definition, extra revenues coming in and lower expenditures, yet the deficit is driven by the inverse of that. So I'm wondering what happens if free cash drops?
Well, then you have to make decisions about what your priorities are and what you can fund. That's really what it comes down to.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brown, and then Ms. Goldstone.
So when we're looking at this graph, the one you just had up a minute ago, we're talking about just maintaining the debt service. But when we talk about this 2030 timeframe, up to 40 million, that's if we did all the capital projects in our portfolio, correct?
That's correct.
So we need to whittle that down so we don't ever get near that 40 million.
Right, and I mean, the forecast is built to have a little bit of flexibility so that, because as I said, I mean, particularly with capital, that stuff changes almost on a daily basis, those needs. Emergencies things happen. The storm obviously created some issues that we're going to have to deal with that will involve capital. So, I mean, those things weren't in the 2025 budget. This stuff changes on as I said, on almost a daily basis. So you can't maintain this stuff on a daily basis, but if you have a plan and you know what you need to do, within that plan, you can absorb some of those emergency situations or be a little bit more flexible because you know what you have to do to get to the point where you can fund that other stuff.
Could I just, Mr. Chair, could I make one comment on that? So it's been my experience, and it is about choices. With the 10-year CIP, those outlier years are always difficult. As Laura says, needs change. And by outlier years, it's been my experience, years 7 through 10. It's always been my practice to attempt the first 3 years of a CIP to lock in and identify those needs that it's a plan for a reason. And you know, obviously we can depart from that plan, but a 10-year CIP, there are a lot of circumstances that change. Outlier years 7 through 10 of a 10-year plan are difficult, and you might see some movement. But years 1 through 3 in a 10-year plan, in my opinion, we have to be prepared to make those difficult choices up front and lock in to those choices, especially with regards to some of the larger, more substantial capital projects that we're looking at. That's not to say, and part of this discussion and subsequent discussions going forward for the next several months are going to be just that, looking at the 10-year plan, identifying those things that we think we can push and defer. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but always be careful and cautious about deferring because that cost does tend to escalate. We see that in just one category of the capital plan, the building facility maintenance needs. I think for 20 years we've deferred a lot of that maintenance, and now we're seeing the result of that. So we just have to be cognizant of that. But it is going to be about very difficult choices in collaboration with the board and the community, talking about what's the priority of this community and this board as policymakers. Sorry, Lauren.
Yeah.
I have a question kind of related to Mr. Brown's, and I just want to ensure that my understanding is the same as others. So we've got these two slides here that both have these similar numbers of 14 and 15 million caps, but the keeping debt service below 14 million, that is primarily debt exclusion, tax-based paying debt service. That is different from 15 million in free cash, which is going toward the capital improvement plan, which is largely not debt exclusion, debt service, right? So they're both in the 14, 15 million range that we're trying to cap, but they're two very different things.
Okay, so we'll talk about the debt cap in a minute, but you're right, they are two very different things.
Just one question. So the comment has been made about having two separate meetings, April and November. Am I correct that because certified free cash comes in September, does that lead to the reason why we're dealing with our capital budget in November historically?
I don't know the history of when that changed from doing the capital at a separate meeting from the operating. I would offer two comments. One, could we do it at the same town meeting? Is that possible? Is it feasible? Yes. Most communities do it that way. I will say most communities that have a town meeting form of government are a lot smaller than Falmouth. So I do think it just procedurally, it would be a pretty substantial sort of change to the way we do business. We'd have a little bit of a blackout period where we just need to focus on finance, because the management staff is going to be working on the operating budget and the capital budget, meeting with the finance committee for 5 months. So I wanted to offer both of those things, that it certainly could be done. You could combine them. It would be a significant change for us in how we operate.
Okay. If I could just comment on that.
Yeah, sure.
I know I've been bugging you guys for quite a long time. I really think we should have a meeting that talks about the operating and how it relates to the capital, because they go hand in hand. I really think that we need to find ways to reduce the capital, whether it's divestment of property or some other innovative ideas, because that'll have a direct effect on the operating budget. So I don't see how we can operate and not consider them both at the same time, even if it's two different town meetings.
Okay,
Can I
back to you,
ask-
Laura.
Can I ask one more operating
Oh, yeah,
question?
sure.
Sorry. I guess at the intersection of operating and capital is debt service. So just going back to your one slide regarding the operating forecast model, and maybe this is a parking lot question for later on in the presentation, but have you been able to, in your analysis, look at, we're going to get to a slide that has 5 external pressures on our budgets. But assuming that an operating budget is 80 to 90% immovable, it's personnel related, right? We don't have much say in it as a board, but do you have a feeling, or do you have a thought, have you an analysis of what the root causes are of the deficit of the overspend? It can't just be
Sure.
like
No.
tariffs.
It is a simple mathematical equation. You're restricted to 2.5% increase in your revenues, in your tax revenues. You're restricted in your local receipts by where you think they're going to come in historical performance, and they only increase probably by about 2% a year for the most part. Other available funds pretty much stay flat, so you won't see any real increase in that. And state aid, mostly for schools, comes in probably at maybe 2% higher. So when you put that together and you look at your expenses, I mean, we have maybe a couple line items where we could say, yes, it's only going to increase by 1% to 2%. But most expenses in your budget, particularly your really large ones, your salaries, your any personnel cost, your health insurance, your retirement, certain other expenses increase significantly more than 2% or 2.5% per year.
It's been a huge driver, and starting. So I was hired, as you all know, in June of 2023. So the FY25 budget was the first one that Peter and I worked on, presented to the board. One of the major policy decisions that were made, we had tremendous number of vacancies, and I'll just pick on one department, the police department had significant number of vacancies. We made a conscious decision beginning in FY25 with that contract period to address the Patrol Federation, sergeants and lieutenants in the police department. The result of that was a decrease in the number of vacancies. Chief Laurie reported, last year that for the first time in over a decade, he was full strength. So the wages, the personnel costs are a huge driver of this. But that's not to say that the select board doesn't have a decision on that, because it does, obviously. That's a policy decision. Do we want to be, when I came here in June of 23, we were in the middle of the pack, lower middle, in terms of competitiveness, in terms of wages with the police department. I think we're in the top third now. It varies from year to year, because what we do, the next year somebody else. Yeah. But wages are, in my opinion, when you look at where we're currently at FY27 operating budget compared to where we were perhaps in FY24, a big reason for that increase year to year has been in contracts that we negotiated, particularly with public safety. And as you all know, we're currently working and negotiating with the fire union for that large contract. So that drives a lot of this.
So I appreciate it. I think that's getting at the root cause, which is, are you seeing any projects? You don't want to go department by department, but I guess in future meetings it'll be, what are we seeing as outliers that are percentage growth, really big bumps? Someone moving from 15,000 to 30,000 is 100%. So that's immaterial, right? But if you're seeing any budget items that really have big spikes, that might be causing this deficit to grow. I mean, it'd be interesting to see this later on in an analysis. Maybe we don't have it now, but there's got to be some root causes beyond just inflationary costs.
If I could,
mind if
I'm just going to say, I don't think that's true. I mean, the inflation's at 5.8, and we're only getting 2.5. We're going backwards every year.
Yeah.
I just want to point out, for folks watching at home or anywhere else that this has been a record number of towns in Massachusetts requesting a Prop 2.5 override this year, and I think this is a serious discussion that maybe we call in our state legislators, because I think the state needs to look at how they do local aid, because almost every single town on the South Shore is having financial troubles, we're looking at how is this possible with the number of rising costs. I think that this is part of this is a problem with, there's a lot of mandates on Beacon Hill and not a lot of money's coming with it. So I think that's part of it. And then just while I'm talking, I'll just get my piece in because I don't have too much to add here. I think it's always important to look at other revenues. And that's why I was really glad the enterprise kind of picked up on our starting the discussion on retail cannabis again. And I think we should look at taxes like that and other taxes that we're not capitalizing on that other towns are, that do not hurt our local year-round population.
Okay, Laura, back to you.
Okay. So I'm jumping into the operating budget projection. Can you see the numbers on the screen, or do I need to? You cannot? No? All right. All right, I'm going to make it bigger. All right, so as I said, we took the current year budget and we broke it down into different category groups, okay? And 2026 is just in there for,
We don't have this one in the packet, correct?
Yeah,
you do.
Page 33.
It's,
Yeah, 33, yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have the page numbers because I'm using Excel.
Oh, I stand corrected.
You got it? Yep. Okay.
All right, so you'll see there are some groups here. So we've managed to do this all in about 34 lines. But one of the things about government is, other than a handful of categories, most expenditures we can figure out pretty well, are going to remain flat or only increase by a couple of percent, maybe 2 to 3%. Some of that is because they can't increase any more than that because we don't have the money to fund it. And some of it just is that, office supplies, unless you've got something going on in your office, it's pretty stable from year to year in most of the departments. Yes, there are increases in prices, but not to the extent that they're going to impact any kind of forecast. So it doesn't need to be really granular to figure out what your operating forecast looks like, is the point. So we do know, computer equipment, we have an inflation factor in there of, I'm trying to get the page over.
1.1, right?
Yeah, 10%, right, 10%. And that's how you would read that inflation factor. The one's only in there so that the formula works easily. Dredging, so employee benefits. We know that computer equipment, security software, maintenance, they usually increase by 10% or more each year. That's expensive. It's expensive and pretty much necessary, unfortunately. Dredging, chemicals, sludge, waste disposal, they increase by more than 3%. Most operating expenses do not. So when you look at your categories, you'll see one big operating expense that's in there at 3.5%. I believe 3%. What? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I do. All right. And then you have other things like health insurance is separate because it increases by around 8% each year, or has the last couple of years. We're lucky it's been that well. Salaries and wages is in at 3.5%. School department is in at 3.5%, which it's conservative, but not conservative in the right way. We have retirement in at 8% because that's what our current schedule, fee schedule is that we've gotten from the Falmouth Retirement Board, and that will get us fully funded apparently by 2034. So that is an issue we're going to talk about a little bit, and it is one of the recommendations we're going to make because, first of all, the state law says that it has to be fully funded by 2040, but PIRAC, the group that does all of the retirement actuarial valuations, said, no, in order to reach full funding by 2040, you need to be fully funded by 2035. We don't really care what the state law date is. So everybody's schedule has been sort of tailored to reach that. Now, I would argue that what the state law should say is that you should be 80% funded by 2040. And that should be the target for funding long-term pension plans, because pension plans are designed to last for 50, 70, 75, 100 years or longer.
Laura, can I interrupt, Mr. Chair? So to put things in perspective, and I think people in the audience and at home can see this, when you're looking at those, at the major categories, retirement is the line obviously you're referring to now, Laura, right?
I'm retiring, yes.
FY27, that's
right here.
13.7, almost $13.8 million of the operating budget that's driven by this state law, or PIRAC, right? Public Employee Retirement Administrating Commission. That we think there's some room for some discussions, petition, and we're going to talk about that later tonight. That's a huge number, and as you look, it just continues to get larger and larger, right, based upon those. And what assumptions go into that other than the 8% customary or required contribution, right? 8% per year is what we're required to contribute.
That's right now. Mm-hmm. So if we drop this, and you can, I'm not going to do it right now, I'm not going to demonstrate it because it's hard to, but if we drop that to 1.05, that factor, so a 5% increase each year, you don't eliminate the amount that's due, but it pushes it out. And you would change fiscal year 28 to 35 forecast, it would defer $20 million just on that one line alone, if you were able to drop your retirement contribution to 5%. Now, I don't know if that's realistic or not, but it is certainly something worth considering.
It extends the date that we're fully funding.
It would extend the date. I don't know to when, because we don't have an actuarial.
Currently, we're under schedule to fully fund by 2034.
Right now we are.
By law, that number is 2040. So there's an opportunity to look at trying to move that number, because it's a huge impact.
Did I understand that right? We're now budgeting to be totally funded by 2034, but the state would allow it to go to 2040, is that right?
Yes, but PIRAC will not, and they do all the actuarial valuations and set the schedules for all of the retirement systems.
Okay.
Couple of other questions while we're on this part of the spreadsheet. Smaller numbers, but electricity, I know it continues to go up fairly minimally, but with the number of solar projects that we have coming online, is that reduction in demand for town buildings built into this forecast or not?
Yes. Well, certainly the ones that have come online already, not the ones that have just been approved. There have been some that have just come through, but we don't have that built in at this point, no.
Okay, excellent. And then
this is based on known expenditures as of the 2027 approved budget.
Yeah. No, I'm just trying to make sure I understand the assumptions. And then the dredging line, a couple pages on, there's a capital bulkheads and dredging 9.04 million. What is that's
They're not redundant,
Right.
which is the obvious question, right? So we have smaller annual type dredging projects, and then we have some really large ones that will need to be debt funded.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so just as an example, so right now, you see, we have a deficit programmed for 2028 of $1.4 million at the bottom, right? The 1.4 million?
Mm-hmm.
So if we take that and let's just say we assume that we're going to reduce expenditures by that amount in 2028, right? So if I do this, this. So that's a permanent reduction, so it carries out in every year. And so then you eliminate that there, it reduces the amount of your deficit in 2029, and I'm pointing this out, so if I put this in as an operating override in 2029, right? 242750. So the tax implication that you see at the bottom here, the tax impact, the 10 cents per thousand, or $102.63 for average assessed valuation.
And what number are we using for that average? Or
I believe the number is, that's actually on your slide.
yeah, it's somewhere here.
It's 1 million, the state determines that. It's 1,026,000.
So one thing I think it's going to be really important, I know we don't have it tonight, but I think it's going to be really important to see is what an override, an operating override in 28 paired with a 10% residential tax exemption could look like, where we, instead of having that residential tax exemption be revenue neutral, we actually pair that with an override and tax rate increase of some sort, which would obviously shift that break-even point, but offers us the opportunity to increase town revenues while still providing constant or reduced tax burden for most of our residents.
Right.
Peter's actually been, we had that discussion this morning, and he's working on and we're hopeful to be able to show that perhaps the next time we meet.
Laura, just a quick question. And correct me if I misheard this, but if we, let's just say, find some efficiencies in the budget in 2028 and not go to an override, so the 1,428,169 number, if we were to find budget efficiencies without making cuts or an override, would that have a positive impact on the out years?
Yes.
Okay. And then, cool, that's great to hear. I wasn't following you on the 2,427,250 number that you threw in for 2029. Where did that number come from? Because I appreciate what it means.
Between the two.
It is the difference between the two?
Projected
All right, let me
Yeah,
take it
if
back
you
out.
take 2029 and subtract 2028,
Okay,
I think
I
that's
had
where
just
you
missed
get
that
number.
piece, but the point is noted that a change there has a compounding effect in the out years. So anything we do in the first 2 years is huge, to Mr. Venshaw's point earlier, both regarding the capital budget but our operating budget.
Works for both revenues and expenses.
Huge.
Right? Absolutely.
Okay. All right, and I'm just going to show you that, for instance, that 1,000,004 carried over onto the combined projection forecast, which we're really going to look at last, but most of these numbers carry over from the other forecasts, obviously. So you'll see that it has an impact.
Laura, if I might, so we can't see those numbers, so maybe tell them what tab they're on so that they can flip to it, but also increase the zoom.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, it went back down. Okay. So I'm on, it says, it's called, it's not the operating, it's not the debt.
Operating debt and cash-funded CIP projections.
That's right. I think it might have saved as the next page, actually, on the PDF.
It is the next page in the packet.
All right, so what this does is it brings over those changes, all right? So the 1,000,004 came over from the operating projection, and you can see on the bottom, for instance, that I have this original with no changes. So here it says, if we hadn't made that change, the total deficit would have been 1.6 million, but now it's 182,000. Are you following me? So the 182,000 is here, where it says remaining surplus deficit. We'll go over this sheet more in detail in a bit, but I just want to show you how the forecasts interact, really. I'm going to take that number back out here because I don't want to mess up the other forecast, but you'll see. Are there any more questions on how the operating, we'll go down to the revenues now. All right. And I also want to point out that on this operating forecast, you'll remember that it's only authorized and issued debt. So any debt that has been authorized and not issued, or any debt that's projected, is not included on this page. This is only authorized debt that has been issued. So when you look at the line existing and authorized long-term debt, you'll see it's decreasing over the years. That's because it doesn't include any possible new debt coming on.
And just to confirm, the operating override's permanent tax increase.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
That's right. Any more questions on the operating budget projection before I shift over to debt?
I have lots more questions, but I imagine we're going to break it down more in these future meetings. So I have, like I said, those capital implications. So I guess at a future meeting, we're going to address those.
I think we're moving into capital.
No, that's, we're going to do that next.
She's going to show
Okay,
it
good.
combined.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to turn to the debt projections, which should be your the page.
Are we going to go back to revenue?
I'm sorry? Oh, yes, you would like to do revenue. Okay. No, that's okay. So this shows you your revenue. It shows you the 2.5%, proposition 2.5%, maximum amount that can be increased. If we put an override in, it'll automatically flow into the next. It also includes the debt exclusions that have already been approved, that are still outstanding from debt that has been existing and issued for quite a while. And it also shows you that we have estimates in there of a 2% increase in both local and local receipts and in state aid. We have no increase programmed for other available funds because, as I said, we don't know what that's going to be. That tends to be flat. And the tax is by law what's allowed by law, with a conservative estimate of new growth, the same one we've used for, I don't know how many years, of 900,000 built into the forecast.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because I'm guessing that's a question we should be asking ourselves, which is what economic or zoning changes could help increase this new growth potential? Because if we've just been putting in a placeholder with no data to back it up, perhaps we can put something in there like an economic vision or some other things, because right now I think you're pointing out very succinctly our expenses are rising at a rate of almost 5%, and our revenues are only 2%. Can new growth help bridge that gap?
It can, but it jumps around a lot. So
what does?
It depends on when how far along the projects are, when they can be evaluated to be added to the roll, and at what value. So how many projects are out there, what types of projects.
Mr. Chair, if I could chime in on that as well. Sorry, go ahead and finish your thought.
No.
So yeah, I just wanted to say, so 30 years working for 4 towns and going to many conferences, the takeaway is it's very hard to move the needle on new growth through policy. As Laura was indicating, there are economic factors that we don't control that spur housing construction and development or shrink it. Potentially, if you make big zoning changes, you could drive some new growth for a couple of years. I don't pretend to know how the seasonal communities zoning change might impact things, but also it gets complicated because if your zoning change creates a lot of residential housing, how does that affect the expense side of the equation, and is it a net positive or a net negative? I know in communities where most of the housing is occupied by school-aged children, it's generally new housing construction looks great in the first year where you get your new growth, but it tends to be a net negative because the cost outweighs the revenue. So all of which is just to say, yes, a big zoning change could affect new growth, but it's generally very difficult to move the needle on that.
What about?
And I suppose a recession could really reduce the new growth number. Is that correct, Peter?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What about business development and economic development? Because as the board chair and I serve on EDIC, or used to serve on the EDIC, I think there's a role for what economic development could be in this town beyond tech park and solar parks and housing.
Yeah, actually, I've been speaking kind of offline with both Mike Kasparian and Wayne about having that discussion. I know you've been part of that, and I think it's a definite thing we need to start looking at for future revenue possibilities.
That's one of the, in previous communities that I've managed, focusing on putting a greater burden of greater percentage of the tax burden on commercial industrial development versus residential, diversifying and having a greater percentage of commercial industrial has been a focus. I know that's not been a focus here in Falmouth. Housing has been the focus. But I think that is a policy change worthy of discussion going forward, looking at industrial commercial development.
Oh, and Jack's marijuana businesses will be able to bridge that gap too.
I think it's also important to note that if we're thinking about policy changes to try to stimulate new growth, even if they do work, the benefits of that would come some number of years down the line, right? Projects don't just...
They don't happen
they don't happen by FY28 to fill a budget deficit.
One thing we could do, though, in the short term is maybe try to take advantage of the Seasonal Communities Act. Some of these smaller lots that the town may own that maybe formerly were not buildable, we could divest ourselves, sell them to developers. There's things we can do. I think we can trim our budgets in all the little ways that might not seem impactful, but if we do a lot of them, just like your household budget, I think it'll have an impact.
The only thing I was going to add is, anyway, and this is more zoning than finance, but anyway, so we can have mixed use in areas that make sense and it's easy to connect to sewer. The more mixed use, the better in terms of residential, but also new businesses that can come in.
back to you.
Okay, are there any more questions on the operating budget projection at this point? Okay, we're going to jump into debt. Can you see this? Okay. All right, the first part of this, I'm going to go through this pretty carefully because I think it's important. The first part of this shows, let's ignore the first line for a minute, the total debt kept below 15 million. The current outstanding debt, we have the amortization schedules, we're paying that debt off, that debt has been issued, and we know what those numbers are going out. We also have debt that has been authorized but not issued yet, and that includes for the Bourne Pond Bridge for $10.725 million, phase one of the sewer project, and for $50.374 million, and the police station design, which was just approved of non-exempt debt for $4.7 million. So we haven't needed to borrow that money yet. We will borrow it when it makes sense to borrow it, both in terms of our needs and also in terms of what we can get for interest rates in the market.
But that's new debt, but we're also carrying significant existing debt, right?
Right.
Which is the debt service.
Those are those numbers right off the, so current outstanding debt is what our existing debt that has been issued is. Then we have the debt that's been authorized that we haven't issued yet, but we'll need to issue. We've started some of those projects. We certainly started the sewer project.
Right, but what I'm saying is, we've got a lot more than, this is the new debt that is coming on.
Right, we haven't gotten to the new debt yet. This is just, we're trying to get to the where, the debt that we have already obligated.
Service, but not the total
or been
debt.
authorized to pay.
That's the amount that we're paying toward the total debt. The total debt is over 100, right?
You guys
Yeah,
just
so
reminded me
when I
today's
say
day.
debt, when I give you these numbers, this is the annual principal and interest expense related to those debt issuances.
Right, that's the point I'm making.
Okay.
That's not how much we
It is
are in
not
debt.
total debt. Total debt is a whole different story and a different measurement.
Right.
But it does point something out. So when you get on, there's a worksheet that you can use for a variety of, there's a lot of worksheets on the Division of Local Services. But it looks kind of like this. I know you can't really see it. But basically, you can plug in what your annual increase is going to be for either an operating override or a debt authorization, and find out what the tax impact is going to be based on the numbers that are certified in the Department of Revenue. Right? You want to make sure annual debt is the only thing that we're allowed to put in there for any potential debt. So, for instance, with the police station, the projected debt of now 60 million, you can't, that 60 million does not belong in this worksheet at all, okay? You can only put in the 6 million that will be your first year of outstanding principal and interest that you're going to repay to determine what the tax implications are going to be. Because you can only put in exempt debt above Proposition and 2.5 for the amount of that particular year's debt service related to that debt. All right?
That's to use the
So when we talk
worksheet.
about tax calculations and tax impact, that's where the number comes from. I don't remember what the specific, well, it's on here. So if you look at the police station, the 26 cents per thousand, or basically $206 a year, that's related to the annual debt service, and all debt has been projected in this forecast as level principal. There are two ways you can do debt. You can have a level payment each year, or you can have a level principal where you're paying more in your initial years and decreasing over time. And the reason that we did it with level principal and that we prefer to do it that way is because it's less interest that you're paying over the life of the bond.
Are we dealing with 20 or 30 years?
It can be either 20 or 30
But the
years.
numbers that we have here,
The numbers that you have here is 20 years on the police station, and then there are other numbers. It's 30 years on Lawrence School, for instance, but it has to be a number that makes sense. The project, like you couldn't do 20 years for computer equipment because computer equipment doesn't last 20 years. It doesn't have a 20-year life. So it has to make sense in terms of the life of the project that you're building. And also, their state has regulations around that too. So what you're allowed and not allowed.
in other words, you can't cook the books.
No, you cannot. Ever. Nor do we want to. Sorry, I'm an
You're
accountant
right.
at heart. Fiduciary responsibility. All right, I'm going to back up now to the first line. So we went back and looked at the amount of our annual debt service. This is total debt service. This is not exempt versus non-exempt. This is total debt service that we have had, and if you go back to 2000, I have it on here. No, I don't have it on here. I have it on my notes. Yeah, so we've been limited to 15.5 million or less over the last certainly 15 years, because I went back to 2013 and it was 15.4 million in that year, and it was 15.6 million in 2016, and it's actually been pretty much declining every year since. Maybe because people wanted to keep the tax rates low? I don't know, but it certainly hasn't. It's an artificial number, the 15 million, but it hasn't kept pace with inflation on the basis of cost of projects. I will certainly say that. So it is something to think about when you're looking at debt as a whole.
Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of that number, is there a best practice target in terms of percentage of budget, or is it a purely, I guess, kind of logistical with what else the town has on its plate, what we've felt could be afforded?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. I mean, I believe our policies do include an annual debt service should not exceed maybe, I don't know what it is, 9% of the total budget. But those are policies set by the select board.
I guess I'm thinking bond rating. I don't know what other considerations there might be.
Bond rating agencies will certainly look at your policies and decide whether it makes sense. They'll look at what you're doing and decide if it makes sense. But at the same time, I mean, if you're not doing any work, that's going to affect your bond rating also, because they know that you're just putting off the inevitable. So there's a little bit of leeway in terms of what makes sense from the bond rating standpoint.
So I mean, I think it's kind of evident that while we're not happy about tax increases and we're going to try and figure it out, it's actually a result of decisions that have been made for years by prior select boards and this select board for the past 2 years that I've been on it, that have, kept the taxes as they are. And so we've got to keep that in mind going forward. Realize there may be some tax increases, but we've made some conscious decisions in a number of areas to keep the taxes as low as possible up to this point. So just something we need to consider.
While we're at debt, we talked about the percentage of debt service, so we'll define that later where we are. But something for us to think about as a board as we have future meetings is looking at a policy target. But do we have, I know Doug brought up the outstanding debt total that we have there, but do we have a debt ceiling?
Yes, usually it's a percentage of total assessed value, and we're way below what that would be. I'd have to go to you can find it in the annual audit.
That's okay. I
There is
appreciate
a disclosure.
the answer.
All right, so for purposes of this calculation, we said, all right, we're going to keep debt at 15 million or below for purposes of this forecast, because that's been the policy pretty much going forward. So when you take what's currently outstanding and authorized, and you subtract it from the 15 million, the remaining debt drop-off, I'm calling it here, is what's left for possible future debt outside of debt overrides. Okay? So now we're going to take a look at the potential projected projects. So,
I'm sorry, does everybody understand that last point that Laura just made?
Yeah, that's the drop-off.
Yep.
That's the ability to borrow. The ability to borrow that we have coming up, but now we have to compare it to our wish list, right?
you have more ability to borrow.
Well, I
The
mean-
15 million is an artificial ceiling, if you will.
Right.
And it's just based on the fact that historically, for the last 15 years, it's been at 15.5 million and actually dropping, as you can see, going forward.
If I may just interject to the last question, is there a debt ceiling? I just looked it up, I didn't know this off the top of my head. It's 5% of equalized valuation, which is 1.1 billion. So we're not in danger of getting anywhere near that.
Cool, thank you.
Okay. So the potential projects, so I split wastewater out and show it in here, but it's below the other projects. So you can see we have the East Falmouth Library for $6 million. We have, some of these have been assumptions, but I took information that, with the exception of one item, everything was in the 10-year CIP. So we had comprehensive building needs in there at $10 million a year for 5 years. So we said, okay, we're going to borrow $25 million in 28, and we're going to borrow another $25 million a couple years later, and that's how we figured out what the debt related to that is. It has no real basis in fact, because we don't actually know how that money is going to need to be spent in what increments over time. So, but for purposes of this, it was in the 10-year plan, so that's how we put the money in.
Laura, just have a quick comment. I'll keep this brief. Greg Endicott, as you all know, a couple of years ago launched that building inventory evaluation study. Greg Endicott, Peter McConerty, and DPW are very close. They're working with the vendor now to finalize the capital planning module of the platform that's going to allow us to, Laura's right, we don't have any way to kind of like slice and dice this number other than applying $10 million a year. It's going to allow us to prioritize based upon policy set by the select board what we want to go after: life safety considerations, use of the facility. Peter, you remember any of the other classifications? We're going to be able to really, at a granular level, go in and set parameters to allow us to kind of identify that number and have good confidence level that that would be the required amount of investment to maintain our buildings each year. Right now, as Laura said, we've got $10 million programmed into the CIP for the next 5 years.
Right, and we split it into debt in two bundles of 25 million.
And that's a hugely arbitrary number right now. So we're hoping, based upon this module, that we're going to, and within the next several weeks, I'm being told. So hopefully during these series of presentations, we're going to be able to come and give a presentation that's going to allow us to get that number much more concrete and specific.
Okay. Then we have combined stations 3 and 4 for 15 million. Again, that's not a number, it's a number we took based on, we inflated what we paid for Hatchville and came up with the number that way. There's bulkheads and dredging, large projects of about 9 million. Marine Park Phase 2 for 5 million. Coastal erosion for Minot and Grand of 13 million. Upper Cape Regional Tech, 16.225 million. Now, this was not in our 10-year CIP, but we discovered through asking, actually, members of our finance committee discovered through talking to the Upper Cape technology people that they were accepted into the same Massachusetts School Building Authority program that Falmouth was for warrants. And when I had a phone conversation with Roger Forget, and he seemed to think that the project was going to cost in the neighborhood of 100 to 150 million. And so I took 100 million. They're potentially eligible for a reimbursement of, let's say, 50, I can't remember the exact percentage. I think it was, no, that's Falmouth is eligible for that. The Upper Cape is eligible for a higher rate of reimbursement. I think it might have been 50%. So then I took the town of Falmouth's share of the budget at this point in time, which is just shy of 34%. And that's how we came up with that 16.225 million, which is obviously not money that we can just fund. We're going to have to borrow that money for them to do the renovations up at the Upper Cape Regional Tech School.
So just a quick point, when we say we have to borrow the money, this is the premise of the concern, Mr. Chair, is I know we haven't said we're going to raise taxes, but we often say the words, it will involve borrowing more money. So that's my point in this, we have to be cognizant of how much, and this is the exercise, we are going to borrow and how much the tax burden affordability is on our average taxpayer, the people we want to keep here.
No, I'm not disagreeing one bit. I just, what we've decided and what we need to consider, that's all.
Your earlier point, never mind.
Well, and there are there are some assumptions in here that, in terms of timing, when the project will start, how much we'll need at what given point in time. Some of that stuff is better. Some of the larger projects have that work already done, but there are projects in here, like the Lawrence School, that work hasn't been done at all yet. So, we're going with the number that was in the 10-year plan for 150 million. We don't know what the number will be. We didn't reduce it by the 38.5% because we have no idea what the number is going to be. If it comes in at 200 million, then 150 million over 30 years is likely close, maybe a little high, but not much if we have to borrow that much. So right now, and also the timing of when these projects will happen is something that needs to be considered as well. I mean, some of these projects you may want to defer for a while. And as I said at the beginning, at any given day, this information can change.
So they don't have a quorum. Am I allowed to ask any of the finance committee members to make public comment if they wish? Just, they look at.
Let's get through
Okay,
this
all right.
procedure and see if anyone
I've
from
just-
the FinCom wants to talk.
Number of different faces, so I'm just intrigued.
I'm getting a shake of the head over there, so, okay.
Well, we are also going to meet with FinCom on the forecasts on May 6th.
Yeah, good. Awesome.
Laura, as we're looking at these numbers for potential projects, including wastewater, have we calculated in the operating budget projections the operating cost of each of these major projects in that?
We have not.
Okay, because
Cost or savings? No, it has not been factored into the operating budget.
again, by way of example, Lexington, very expensive building, having to cut people. I think before we get to that, we're going to have to look at, you know, can we afford this? If not, are we willing to cut services to fund some of these projects? Because I don't think we have the money to do it all based on current assumptions.
Mr. Chair, I can give a quick example of how we are beginning. As Laura mentioned, that those costs aren't calculated or figured into this, but we are working with the police chief and the consultant and deriving that number now with regards to the operating cost of the new facility, the 45,000 square foot versus the current facility.
I think we're way ahead of Lexington at this point.
So we do know that's a
good
factor.
thing.
We do know it's a factor, and we are investigating that, and hopefully we'll have that number relatively quickly.
And the combined projection sheet that we'll look at the end, it does include everything. So you have at least a basis for starting those discussions. All
Well,
right.
just for future meetings, and Doug, to pick up on what you've been saying for a long time, looking at these potential projects, I'll be quite frank, if I were asked to describe what a number of these are, I wouldn't know. And so I think we really do need to dig into, and Laura, as you just said, both what are these projects, what's their priority for the town, and potentially what's the scope, what's the scale, and what's the timing of those, which I think is beyond the scope of tonight's discussion, but obviously really important.
Just another question on the potential impacts of the projects that you have in here. Is anything that does not have a tax impact means it will not? Like, there's no tax impact if we do that project? So, for instance, East Falmouth Library.
I didn't calculate it for the smaller ones because there's enough debt dropping off that it would cover those.
And then same with the wastewater?
Well, so wastewater's a little different.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
So the wastewater projects, yeah. So you'll see as I'm paging down here, we have possible options for wastewater debt that are just there on this page to give you an example of what potentially could happen. So if you look at wastewater improvement fund for 1.5%, and as you know, I'm retiring at the end of May, so I probably am the only person who can stand up here and say this, but there are people that have talked about potentially shifting money from the CPC fund, which is currently at 3%, sort of splitting that in half and creating a wastewater improvement fund. That is an option, or you can do another 1.5% or 3% surcharge just for the wastewater improvement fund. But we are recommending it because the costs of wastewater are really expensive. And those projects tend to be, the timing is not always exact in terms of the 10-year plan, but they're planned out quite far in advance, those projects. And so, and the reasons for them tend to be regulatory in nature, mostly because in a lot of cases you have to do those projects. So that's why wastewater is shown a little separately, and that's why one of the recommendations or items to consider is possibly covering wastewater debt with a wastewater improvement fund.
Can I ask a question
Go
about
ahead.
how the WIF works? Is this any excess not spent rolls over? So
Yes.
as we're looking at this across the years, it's, we get to 2034 and we've actually got a deficit, but in those first years, we're actually accumulating money in the fund?
That's right.
Okay.
So the numbers you see here show you if we used the 1.5% wastewater fund, you'll see you're accumulating money, and then as you start to use debt, you'll see we're reducing by the amount of wastewater debt. So you at least have coverage on the 1.5% through fiscal year 2033. And again, wastewater tends to be, I don't know, you do a 20 or 30 year, infrastructure improvement plan. But timing isn't always, you can only guess at your timing. So when you get into the outer years and you're looking at what would be phase 2 or 3 of the sewering plan, once you start to get out into past 2036, I think now you're even talking about possibly phase 3 at that point. The timing on that and the numbers obviously aren't exact. You'll have a much better sense of that as you move along.
Quick wastewater question. How much do we draw out of the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund?
So I'm not sure how to answer that question other than I'll try it this way. So the fund established bylaws and based on all of the available information as of a few years ago, the policy decision was that 25% of all the debt service is going to be subsidized by the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund. So we had gathered all of the capital plans, all the wastewater plans of all the Cape communities, and that looked like it was feasible. Fast forward, COVID and hyperinflation, we had to redo that model from money up front to offsetting debt service, and 25% seemed doable, and that's sort of where we are now, but there's pressure on it from another end, which is in order to, as you probably know, in order to be eligible to get money from the Cape Fund, you have to be approved by the state on the state revolving fund. Well, the Cape has overwhelmed the state revolving fund, and they have put us on notice that they're going to be challenged to fund our wastewater needs over the next 10 years.
Thank you. It's generated $125 million over that in revenue, and I know it's been a successful at 2.25% on state excise tax, but obviously the projections have been a lot more than expected. So thank you for that update. I just didn't.
Laura, quick question for you. We're given individual override impacts on this one with the taxes, and some of it's going to be offset by retiring debt. But is it possible for us to get maybe in a future meeting like a sequenced multi-year, maybe a multi-decade override map? Because right now we're seeing things individually, but not collectively on an individual taxpayer. Like, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does. Okay. Any other questions on the debt projection? I know we're, okay. I'm going to jump to the free cash CIP funded projection, but this won't take any time at all. So as I had said, this is the November 2025 10-year plan. All the debt-funded projects have been pulled out of this, and there's been a couple items highlighted, which I can guarantee you have already changed because MES submitted their CIP early. So I know that has changed. those highlighted items, we're saying we're not going to issue debt for those, but they're too large, or they're not the type of project that we would issue debt for, like beach nourishment for $3 million, because sand doesn't have much of a life in terms of long-term debt. Sorry, that's the reality. So we're saying we're going to use some of the 17 million plus that we have right now in capital and debt stabilization. That's the only reason they're highlighted on here, for purposes of the projection. So if you go to the last page on this, you'll see what the amount of the free cash proposed funded CIP is in total. And you'll see that we've set the free cash target at 15 million. And so in fiscal year 27, can you see this? Is this on the screen? Can you see this okay? Yep. I have to keep enlarging it, right? Okay. So if we stick to the 15 million in fiscal year 27 on this projection, then we need to find $5.6 million to reduce in fiscal year 27 capital that's in the plan. Okay, and that's the way this works all the way across until in the last year, you actually have a slight, you're below the 15 million.
But we haven't piled on the other debt.
Yep. There's no debt on this one. This takes all the debt out.
Okay.
This is only for what we're proposing to fund for 10 years with certified free cash and grants or other available funds if we have them, but it's primarily certified free cash.
Two questions on that. I mean, well, so one, a comment, which is, I mean, for one, I would say something like the $3 million in sand for Surf Drive. We should be looking for grant opportunities from the state for things like that and making sure that we optimize grant opportunities. I always find it disorienting when looking at the budget request that grant-funded projects don't show up in there. I know we don't have a good way to bring all of that together, but making sure that as much as possible of these projects gets grant funding. My question is with the use of capital and debt stabilization funding and what went into the projected numbers there with the 8.9 million used in FY27 and 1.5 in each of the subsequent years.
Right. So if you go back, so I've just paged up to the water fund has 3.3 million in for construction of the distribution storage building. And I'm saying, yeah, we're not going to borrow for that. We're going to use capital and debt stabilization for that. The same thing if you go up, 1.6 million in lift station resiliency improvements for wastewater. And then I had already pointed out the beach, and then the rest of it in the second and third year, it's all the aquaculture expansion for nitrogen reduction. But I know that those are no longer the numbers, and that will not be what's in the fiscal year 27 through 36 CIP.
So Laura, going to the bottom of your spreadsheet where you show the the surplus deficit over target. So in 2027, we're going to have to find $5.5 million or cut 5.5 from the task list, which
Right.
would then create a deferred project.
Right.
And it's not accounted for in the 3 million shortfall the next year. So ultimately, the next year would be in total, we'd have to come up with $8 million unless we happen to find.
No, this
No.
does not carry forward because it's a one-time expense. So it's only an expense in that given year.
I think what he's saying is that the options we would have with any given expenditure here is never do it, defer it a year, find another funding source.
Oh, yes, if you deferred the projects, then yes, you would. But again, fiscal year '27, what we're looking at are is the 10-year CIP, and departments are starting to put together the actual fiscal year '27 requests. Now, they should not be that much different than what has already been submitted, because we've asked departments to be comprehensive and thoughtful about at least the first 3 to 5 years of the 10-year plan, so that, we can plan accordingly, if you will. But, the stuff is changing.
Yeah. Sorry,
particularly in
I was
capital.
just listening. What was your point? Yep.
Anyway, we're assuming in the combined projection, which I'm going to go to now, that we've reduced to 15 million in each of the years. All right, so now we're going to look at the combined operating debt and cash-funded CIP projections. All right, so the top part is any possible funding that's in any of these projections that we've talked about so far. So we know what the taxes, the other funding sources, local receipts, state revenues, they all come from the operating budget forecast. Annual debt service capacity below 15 million, that comes from the debt forecast and was in that page. And then the free cash funding target of 15 million. So we're assuming we're going to have 15 million in each one of these years of certified free cash to pay for capital. And then the three years of the capital and debt stabilization fund funding, which we just looked at. If we had left the operating override in our operating projection, that would have come over as a potential funding source. The debt overrides, for purposes of this combined projection, we're assuming, because we've already made it clear to the public several times or more than that, that if we do the debt for the police station, and if they do and if they approved the Lawrence School, that's going to have to be exempt debt. There's going to have to be debt exemptions for those two projects. They're large, and the timing would require debt overrides, or, debt exclusions. So when you put all of that down here, you get total revenues and funding sources. Then we have our operating expenses, which included the issued debt only. We have projected debt, except for wastewater, which comes from the debt projections. We have the projected wastewater debt. We have free cash funded CIP, which we just looked at. That comes from the page we just looked at. And then the capital and debt stabilization funding. Sorry, no. I am on the right page here. Okay. That gives you your total expenses and other funding needs. And then you have your overall surplus of revenues over expenditures, revenues and funding sources over expenditures and uses. So this shows you what's going to happen if we go forward with everything as in the forecast at this point in time. We issue the debt when it's projected in the forecast, for every project that's projected in the forecast. When we fund the operating expenses as issued in the forecast, and then some possible solutions. So we talked about what would happen if we put in the $1.4 million as a reduction of expenditures to balance out the operating forecast in fiscal year '28. So that would come over as a possible solution and reduce the $4.7 million deficit to, I believe it was, well, it's $1.4 million off of it. Then if we add back, we reduce the CIP, free cash funded CIP to $15 million in each year, that gives us reduction of the deficit as well. And then if you do the 1.5% wastewater improvement fund, which is what the highlighted numbers are, that's a possibility as well. So overall, I mean, you're looking at pretty substantial if you wanted to do, if you were going to try to do tax increases, either operating overrides or debt exclusions each year to get rid of these potential deficits on the red line, the red numbers here, it would be unaffordable. There's no question about it.
So thank you for saying that. Just one quick question for you. I see in the debt overrides, you only list the police station and Lawrence School, yet in another one you have listed potential projects not including wastewater in there. So for the for this worksheet that you have there, none of the other ones that we've talked about, East Falmouth Library, comprehensive building needs, other ones that you have mapped out here as potential tax impacts, they are not included in this spreadsheet, correct? Or in this piece of the work page?
The projected debt service is included in this worksheet. What's not included is what I only assumed debt exclusions for the police station because they've been talked about, and for Lawrence School because they've been talked about.
Okay.
No, none of the others have. What we do have included in here, though, is the amount, if you go back up to the top here, it says annual debt service capacity below 15 million, right? So that's that amount that debt will be dropping off, or that's below 15 million, where you have some capacity for other projects that have already, without significantly impacting your budget.
Laura,
right?
question.
So, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so if you wanted to look at the East Falmouth Library, for instance, your debt service there is about $570,000 a year. So if you look at your debt capacity, that would definitely fit within that. When you look at the police station, that's the first year of debt service, annual debt service on that is $6 million, which is not going to fit in any of that drop-off. And certainly once you get to the 150 or 200 million that you're going to need for Lawrence School, and these are numbers that are being pulled out of the air completely. So please don't quote me. We don't have any idea what the actual cost of that project would be. So I don't want anybody thinking that I'm standing up here saying it's going to cost $150 million to do Lawrence School. We don't know what it's going to cost.
But just to clarify, what number were you using for with respect to the police station? What amount?
60 million.
60. Okay.
Question for you in terms of paying debt service and this connection between debt, capital, and our operating budget. The way you've done this projection, there's $8.9 million in capital and debt stabilization being used largely to offset the free cash funded CIP, right?
Right. Well, I also do have it built. I have $2 million a year as a potential use starting in 2030, if you go down here to the bottom,
Okay.
you'll see additional use of capital. Now, we currently have, let's say, $17.5 million in capital and debt stabilization. So how that's actually going to get used and whether or not there will be additional funding, which we hope there will be, is,
Right. Well, I mean,
can
based on
be
the
done-
projections that are here,
can be
additional
done
funding is not forthcoming.
many different ways. But for purposes of this is what we did.
I guess what I'm getting at is something for us to, I think, consider, double check me on this, but is it, if we do some of the work of trying to pare down the free cash funded CIP burden, there is some of our debt service that is not exclusion funded, and those capital and debt stabilization funds could be used to fill some of that gap, and that would create room in the operating budget. Am I correct on that ripple effect? Because it's coming from the tax levy to fund that debt service that is not exclusion funded.
Yes, it requires
Yeah.
a 2/3 vote by town meeting, but yes.
Yeah, potentially you could use the capital and debt stabilization fund to offset either debt within the levy limit or exempt debt. So depending on which one it is, it would either free up room in the operating budget temporarily for 1 year, or it would reduce the tax burden temporarily for 1 year.
Right.
It's dangerous to start planning it, though. It's more for unexpected. Right.
Okay, are there any additional questions on the forecasts at this point in time? I know it's a lot of information to digest.
I just hope you have a good vacation lined up. You know, the amount of numbers
She
you have
has
to
a
look at.
retirement coming
really,
up. I think that's
know.
the ultimate vacation. But thank you. Yes, this is really helpful.
Very helpful.
I'd like to, just second that. I think this has been very helpful. I think we, the board, should, have to think about whether we want to and think about adopting a sequence of overrides instead of just the one-off votes that we're talking about, but also maybe commit to a multi-year tax roadmap overall, just so we're looking at what the actual impacts are on an everyday person.
And then I don't want to, not to doge it, but if there's any way we can do blanket percent cuts in either capital projects or departments, if it makes sense. I mean, I think that is the last, personally in my philosophy, that's the last place I would like to go, but if that's what it comes to, I think that's also something we should consider.
Said the guy transitioning off.
Okay. So we did put a slide into the PowerPoint that shows you just what, with the projections and the estimates for four potential, 2 operating overrides and the 2 debt exclusion overrides, what the impact would be for an average single-family home and what the impact would be for a median single-family home, just so you have an idea. And we did use the DLS calculator to come up with those numbers, so. As far as the rest of the PowerPoint, I can stand up here and turn the pages, or
Just one clarification, and I probably should know the answer, but the $150 million for Lawrence School, is that the gross amount, or, yes. So we're expecting and hoping for state reimbursement of up to 38% of that amount. Okay. Just want to make sure. Thank you.
So we could have done this a number of different ways. We always want to be conservative, particularly Laura, to her credit. So, we could have put it in at 200, the range given by the school department was 150 million to 200 million. So we could have done 200 million with a 38% reduction for state aid. The other approach was go on the low end of the cost, but not include the reimbursement.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure everyone understood.
And one other thing, if I may, while we're on this slide, I know the select board is aware, but perhaps for the public benefit, just to let folks know that we did get our first professional opinion of cost for the police station based on schematic level design, so still early in the design process, but that number did come in with a new total estimated project cost, including all soft costs, furnishing fixtures and equipment, design, et cetera, of $60 million, which is down from the $65 million that had been our target. And so that's the reason that that $60 million is used for that slide there.
Sorry, and did you say design as well, but we already have the $4.5 million that was
Correct.
authorized
There
for?
will be some additional design in the final appropriation.
And Peter, real quickly, is that based on the proposed staffing for 29 or the future staffing for in 50 years?
So the police station, 45,000 square foot plus outbuilding, does allow for staffing growth for the 50-year plan. So it does allow for significant staff increases. I would point out, and this is something that we can certainly discuss in detail with the architect and OPM, that the number of police officers that we're planning for, building, over and above what we currently have on staff, it doesn't change the square footage as dramatically as I would have thought. Part of it is just, if you think about it, it's a shift operation, right? So we don't have all of the police officers in the building at any one given time. Far from it, because first of all, they're working on shifts, and second of all, even when they're on duty, most of the patrol officers are out in the field. So yes, the building does allow for staffing growth, but not a huge square footage difference if we were to say no staffing growth.
Okay. Well, it is a lot to digest, and thank you, Laura and Peter and everyone else. Would anyone like to have any comments with respect to what we've discussed, or hold your comments for future meetings? We will be having a number of them. Mr. LeMay says yes. Hold your comments. Yeah. Just want to give you the opportunity. Okay, going once.
We have.
Ms. Harris.
We do have three slides
sorry.
that Mr. Renshaw is going to handle at the end.
Okay.
Mary Harris, Precinct 5. I had a great number of thoughts and ideas listening to this presentation and recognize the amount of hard work that went into doing it. One thing that wasn't mentioned is we've had several studies done over the last couple of years where the demographic trends of the town have been projected, which would matter on how we do all our planning. And there doesn't seem to be any coordination among those on which studies are saying that we're going to be losing population versus ones that are gaining population. I think we need to get that resolved as part of our thinking, and I'll save all my other comments for later.
Okay. I certainly didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. Renshaw, so why don't you go forward?
So, Laura, do you
mind? And then
mind?
we'll get to Mr. Netto.
Can you just advance the slides? So this is the participation part. So we've got a couple of slides here that talk about strategies, potential strategies going forward that the board can opt to implement. Some of these we've already initiated. This list is not exhaustive, but I'm going to go through the first 6 or 7 here. Setting expectations for budget increases. Select Board Member Reed, I think this was one of the points in your memorandum. Setting realistic budget targets with department heads as we go into discussions. We've actually begun this. This process, as Laura mentioned, the FY27 CIP capital budget process has already been initiated, and we've already given some pretty stringent requirements with regards to use of free cash, and I'm going to get into that on the next slide. And again, what I want from these next couple of slides are suggestions. We're going to keep coming back to this probably over the next few months, because this really is, in terms of the policy decisions, where we can move that needle, where we can address some of these kind of structural deficits. Timing of tax relief programs and need for overrides. We've already had some of these discussions with regards to currently considering implementing the residential tax exemption in FY28. Coincidentally, FY28 is that first year where we're going to be looking at this potential operational override. We're also, town meeting also, as you all know, just recently approved the affordable rental tax exemption, so that may be another lever, so to speak, technique or strategy that we can employ. The use of establishing and utilizing enterprise funds in new areas. I've had some discussions with staff and some members of the Finance Committee. Solid waste management, that curbside collection. You know, right now, as you all know, that $4+ million is property tax. There's an opportunity perhaps in the future to look at shifting that to more of a fee-based system, an enterprise proprietary fund. Stormwater utility is another concept. I've talked to the DPW director and some members of FinCom. There's significant stormwater needs over the next 10 years, and I don't think we've done a very good job, quite honestly, in programming those costs over 10 years. But a utility fee may be an example of, a tool or a technique that we can employ to reduce property tax burden. Petition states, we talked about this kind of at length with regards to the current 8% contribution that PARAC, the state agency, requires, again, based on the requirement to pay off our pension contribution, pension obligation by 2040. Right now, we're kind of on an escalated, expedited, I should say, schedule, paying that off by 2034. To the extent that we can move that number out to 2036, I think Barnstable County, I think, is an example of where they've been able to.
They're at least 1 year out. I can't remember if it's 2035 or 2030.
Either extend out that fulfillment of that debt obligation by a year or two, or obviously on the other side, reducing the annual contribution would have a huge impact. Laura showed the numbers. I can't remember what they are, but pretty significant impact. Consolidation, I think Select Board Member Brown had been talking about this with regards to our town-owned parcel inventory, looking at selling off parcels of property. We've initiated that with regards to affordable housing, not so much selling them off as a revenue source, but disposing of property. So that will be a future discussion. We're about to launch a feasibility and best use study, as you all know, for 10 Pumping Station Road, as well as Morse Pond. And I think those feasibility and best use studies will inform those decisions going forward. Peter's been getting ready to begin working on those RFPs. So hopefully we'll have that information and again, to inform our decisions. Increased cost shares for retiree health insurance. And importantly, I want to point out, this does not impact our current 50% contribution for current Medicare eligible retirees. This is just for the non-Medicare plans only. I'm looking at amending, revising our contribution toward those plans.
Those would be going forward, or would those impact current retirees as well?
To be determined, yeah, I think that's just a policy decision. Yeah, okay. It could be set. This is a large category, and it encompasses a lot of different things, but changes in policy. And I'll start with this. I'll give you a current example of something that we're looking at, or something we've actually implemented. And it's not listed in the list of examples here. We're actually implementing a soft hiring freeze right now, requiring departments to provide workload and other data measures, metrics to kind of justify and warrant filling positions that go vacant. Another thing to consider is looking at positions that have been funded but yet vacant for over a year. There's a few positions like that could result in significant savings. Again, a discussion for another night. Laura, could you advance the slide, please? I think we've done a really good job over the past few years with regards to the capital improvement plan, again, tying the strategic plan to set priorities and at least show that nexus or connection. But in my mind, there's more that we can do with regards to the operating budget, again, creating that nexus and connection. We talked about, Laura mentioned setting this free cash policy, and I think this summarizes it really well, targeting a balance, a $5 million unspent balance after all capital appropriations have been made, and setting those monies aside for critical needs, emergency needs, following April's town meeting. And she lists a couple of examples that we recently experienced, unfortunately, the snow and ice removal costs and simply just the storm recovery. So clearly, the next 5 or 6 years are going to be very difficult ones, and questions that this select board needs to pose and staff need to do research on, and again, collaborating and working with select board. What projects in the capital plan, current capital plan, can be deferred, can be pushed. I think we have to be very careful, and I think that's why I'm encouraged by, I mentioned it earlier, the Brightly capital planning management tool. That's going to allow us to make better decisions based on data in terms of what categories of building needs should be prioritized over others. Right now, it's a little bit arbitrary, and I think that as we look at going forward, trying to fine-tune that $10 million over the next 5-year number, do we want to focus on life safety? In my opinion, that's clearly important, or some of the more critical use facilities. This is something that we looked at just a few years ago with regards to rate increases, and I'll start with the water. As you all know, it was fall of 2023 when the water rates were most recently set. I understand the water superintendent is looking at revisiting water rates in 2027. Sewer rates were last set back in 2016 and haven't been amended since for a variety of reasons. But it's also my understanding, and talking to the DPW director, that the wastewater superintendent intends to look at, again, FY 27 is I'm sorry, 2027, calendar year 2027 is a opportunity to look at wastewater rates and consider revisions to those rates. We've talked a little bit about the WIF, the Wastewater Improvement Fund, whether the select board, and this is a policy decision, sets that at 1.5% or 3%, and in conjunction with that, considers perhaps some other reduction with regards to the community preservation contribution. That's another policy decision and discussion that has to be had. Examine the policies and practices with regards to how we utilize capital and debt stabilization fund. Laura touched on that briefly tonight, but I think going forward, those are discussions that we're going to have as a group. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, the need to gather citizen involvement and input in the process. I'm currently projecting at least 3 community visioning sessions beginning next month and likely running through August. We may have to adjust that a bit, but I'm looking at right now 3 community visioning sessions where, again, we're going to do kind of a charrette and allow community residents to give us some indication of what the priorities are across those broad categories that Laura showed earlier with regards to the operational budget and the capital plan. So lastly, and just kind of wrap this up a bit, as we've talked about before, and it's been well documented in, I think, the Boston Globe, Cape Cod Times, and even further back than that, the Massachusetts Municipal Association prepared a pretty extensive bulletin kind of documenting the challenges that a lot of Massachusetts Commonwealth communities are facing right now. So we're not unique. It doesn't make any of us feel any better sitting up here and having these difficult decisions in front of us, but we're not unique. Tonight and over the course of the next couple of months, evaluating and understanding the scope of these issues is clearly an important first step. And lastly, this is important, and it's not rocket science, it's very intuitive. Communities are successful to the extent that they can kind of begin to analyze and evaluate the issues. We began to do that tonight with regards to the operating and capital budgets, and then make decisions based upon those factors that optimize fiscal stability going forward for the community. So having community input in this process is going to be hugely important, and it's something that staff and I are kind of planning on right now as we speak. And with that, I think that's the last slide, right? Go ahead.
Which is a good segue into Mr. Neto's community involvement. You wanted to say something.
Laura, could you put your slide on? By the way, that's a lousy position for microphone. Speaking with that to the public. That's a school teacher.
Which slide do you want?
If you would. Plus, we have no podium.
Thank you. But you're addressing the board.
Yeah, just give them that slide.
Yeah.
Joe Netto, Precinct 9. I appreciate the opportunity and the Board of Selectmen in creating this meeting and other future meetings. I would have hoped that we would have had a lot more town meeting members attend this, because not one penny is spent. I've said this once, I've said it 100 times. Not one penny is spent without town meeting voting for it. The selectmen don't raise taxes, town meeting does. And that's, I was just hoping that we would have more interest by town meeting members to get educated. This was a tremendous presentation that Laura gave us. There's a great deal of information to comprehend, but you make decisions, based on data and needs and not wants, because there's no room for wants in the next 5 years. I don't understand, and the one thing I could not comprehend is how the outfall pipe got left out of the police station in Lawrence School. I don't need an answer now. I'm not, but
it is in there somewhere. I mean,
it's there, but in the sheets that you gave, I know it's there, but for the potential tax increase.
What the impact will be.
What the impact is, right.
It just doesn't hit until 2031, but it's in there.
Yeah, okay, but on this graph here, and Laura, I appreciate what you said, it's unaffordable. That's based on the wants of the department heads who represent what they feel, for their department to do the job correctly. We cannot say no to every department that says, I need this to do the service, and that's what they provide for us. These are very hard decisions, to make. But this graph that's up here, as you can see, we can't go, how can we go from a debt of $15 million in 3 years to $40 million? You're not going to do it with my vote in the ballot box. I'm going to be honest with you right now. You're not going to do it. I don't know what's going to get cut, whether it be services, and those are tremendous. Mr. Renshaw just mentioned some of the things, and I applaud him for that, on the forward thinking that he's done. He got me interested in this last August when he spoke to us at the Falmouth Heights Association back in August. And he mentioned, of course, the outfall pipe because it's going in the Heights. And he was very, very blunt. And he says, and we don't have the money to pay for it right now. And after that meeting, I met with members of the FinCom and chairman of the FinCom and tried to get a handle and understanding of these figures that were presented here tonight. But the reason I'm coming to the microphone, because already, again, it's mentioned about raising rates. I applaud you for the CPI reduction. To quickly make that cat's out of the bag. Why don't you do 1% on the Community Preservation Act instead of 3%, and 1% on wastewater sewer, because because I'm paying 3 now. We got Proposition 2.5 overrides. I think these are some of the things that the Board of Selectmen have really got to look at. And the reason I came to the microphone is to represent a group of people that I don't think you're aware of. When this sewer project, this one has a funny name, but when we sewer up to the Coonamessett River, when you take the new Silver Beach sewer project, which is only about 200 homes, the 1,500 homes in the Little Pond sewer project, and I think there's 800, we come to approximately 2,300 homes in Falmouth being sewered. I'm paying a 30-year note every year on my tax bill for that. Those homes on the sewer now represent 10% of the homes in Falmouth. So you have 10% of your taxpayers paying an additional cost for 30 years. You're never going to get the bill paid by me, I don't think. But that's a chunk of money that comes on our tax bill as the sewer abatement. And that's there for probably about 24, how many years have we had the sewer? Anyhow, so that's something that you have to take into consideration. And when you raise the rates on water and sewer, raise the rates for this, it's just another way of saying a tax to pay by the taxpayer. So whether you call it a tax or a rate, it's an increase. And to do this and keep everybody happy is going to be an impossible job that the Board of Selectmen and the town manager is going to undertake. There's no way you're going to make everyone happy. And somebody has got to learn how to say no. So, but thank you for the opportunity. I think this was a very worthwhile. I hope to attend all of your meetings to see the thinking. There's a lot of work that went into just presenting this amount of information here tonight. Hopefully, we'll get a better turnout in the future meetings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Okay. No further discussion on this item?
I just have one last point, and I think to drive it home, I think to figure out affordability, I mean, Mr. Netto just kind of took my thunder where, rate increases still affect the wallet, the shifting of costs still affect the wallet. So the bigger question is, who do we want to live here and stay here? And so we have not, in all these numbers, calculated the tax burden on the median household and then the tax burden for, I would say, 5 or 6 key sectors: trades, fixed income, service industry, science tech, school, and healthcare, to understand what is the maximum acceptable annual tax increase for the median household, but what is the realistic in our override capacity over the next 20 years, because we're throwing around a lot of tax override numbers, but if we can't afford it to keep these people here and we only want rich people here, well, that's fine, make that decision. But I don't think that's what we want, because the fabric of what makes Falmouth special, and I wrote this in the memo, is that we have always been the workforce of the Cape. We have always been the year-round community. So, I mean, yeah, you're right. We have kept our taxes lower than other places, but I think we did it for a purpose, to take care of our people. And maybe we don't have as much bandwidth as we think we do to pay for all of these all at once. So I think for the next thing we have to do is really look at a tax burden analysis to understand, do we have a percentage point to move or a couple? We don't know.
If I might, Mr. Chair, I had intended this to follow from Mr. Renshaw's last slide, not necessarily a rebuttal of Mr. Reed or Mr. Netto, but I would add to what makes towns successful. At their core, we need people to actually want to be here. And no one, rich or poor, will want to be here if we have no beaches and crumbling stairs to the non-existent beaches, if we have decrepit buildings, if we don't have good schools. We can talk about things that are needs or wants. In the end, we need to strike a balance of making Falmouth a livable, desirable community. And that's not going to be accomplished by only saying no and only cutting services. We're gonna have to strike a balance, and quite frankly, you get what you pay for, right? Things don't come for free, either town services or anything else. And so we are going to have to find ways to strike a balance. I don't think there's a way to just cost cut our way out of this and end up with a Falmouth that any of us would recognize or want.
And to that point, I think it's it's missed, but everyone knows it, that the median price house in Falmouth has increased 20% over the past 4 years. And the reason that everyone has seen that increased value in their homes is because of that very reason. And we do need to keep that in mind as well. Thank you.
If I could, Mr. Chair, so I'm hoping the next step will be that we'll look at the capital improvement plan and start to see where we can pare that down. Because I think our biggest responsibility is to find any way we can do anything possible to streamline our operation, reduce our overall tax, overall expenses, so that when we do have it fine-tuned, when we do go to the voters, if we are in the position where we have to, that we've done all we can to show that, we're only going to be increasing what's the minimum required, and it's not just business as usual and, just asking for more money.
I do think we need to outline, all the issues and when we're going to address them. And, as Mr. Reed has said, and as I've advocated since I've been chair, is that I think we need more than one meeting every 2 weeks to start dealing with these going forward. So, but I agree with you, Mr. Brown. I think we need to plot it out and make sure that things work consistently with a focus and, in that particular meeting. If we're going to ask members in the community to, meet more often, we need to be more focused in what we're discussing. So, okay, that being said, we will move on to something that does have something to do with our finances. And again, thanks to Mr. Richardson for bringing this up, and that is any possible modification to our fee waiver policy. Mr. Renshaw?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a discussion tonight, and as the chair pointed out, it was Select Board Member Richardson that brought this to the table, so to speak. What I'm asking for tonight is that we have this discussion about the existing policy, which, as you all know, was drafted in 2016 and hasn't been touched since. There's been no revisions to the policy, and it's 10 years old. And then, based upon that discussion, we will take input feedback from the board tonight, and then my goal is to come back at a future meeting in the near future, based on the input, and with some suggested revisions to that policy, which is now 10 years old. Included in your packet, we asked the office manager, Diane Davidson, to put together some information with regards to the, I'll call it the special events type waivers that Select Board sees quite a bit of. And you have those as 3 spreadsheets in your packet for 24, 25, and calendar year 26 year to date. As you can see, the amount of fees waived are typically around between $11,000 and $12,000, and not a significant amount. One of the other columns, obviously, for each of those calendar years illustrates the amount of fees that would be imposed based upon the fee schedule. But as is pointed out in your packet, the goal of this plan, or the goal of the policy, is to consistently, equitably implement and distribute or implement those fees across all of the organizations that are making application utilizing the schedule of fees. But from time to time, whether it be a nonprofit, affordable housing development, or whatnot, there are times where it would be appropriate to consider waiving those fees. We're here to take in any input you may have with regards to suggested amendments. And quite honestly and candidly, and Peter and I discussed this, the policy as it's written right now needs some wordsmithing in addition to just simple, or not simple, but some significant policy decisions. It's just not very well worded, to be honest with you.
Yeah, thank you. Our policy has kind of been yes, I think, over the past 3 years, and you look at almost $30,000. Before I, continue, I do want to say that all of these, Falmouth is a wonderful community, and all of these events and things that we have considered fees for in the past are all terrific things for our community, and I absolutely support doing what we can to keep special activities like this in place and charity like this in place, because that's part of what makes Falmouth so great. That being said, when we're looking at we just spent 3 hours reviewing our finances, I think we need to think long and hard about, I don't think we're in a position where we can be as charitable as we have been. So whether it is just as individual members, we vote differently than we have. I think it's been kind of ceremonial almost, a lot of fee waivers, where it's on the agenda, that means we're doing it. But I think we should, and as Mr. Renshaw just indicated, I think this policy should be changed because I don't think it's written very, thing is, it can be updated for sure, kind of like how we update a lot of our strategic goals to be more action-oriented and more focused. I think this policy is also like that, where in parts of it can be a bit vague. So I'm of the belief that we should stop considering full fee waivers, period. And that, if it makes sense to do a partial fee waiver, if it's, organization that's looking to, a nonprofit that is looking to bring something to the community, or, one of the different charitable things that we want to help make it contribute to, I think that could be appropriate. But I just don't think we're in the fiscal realities are the fiscal realities, and I don't think we're in a position where we have been giving out as many fee waivers as we have been.
Anyone else? Ms. Goldstone?
When this came up, I was thrown back to, I believe, my first meeting on the board, where one of the questions I asked was, how much do we usually bring in fee waivers? How many of them do we waive? How much are we giving up in revenue? The amount that we are giving up in revenue is fairly small, but as has been noted, we're going to need to make a lot of little nips and tucks to try to make ends meet over the coming years. And I think what to me stands out with this policy, what rubs me the wrong way, is that if we are setting a policy that we are waiving or making exemptions to 50% of the time, then we need to change the policy. Because constantly granting waivers is, first of all, that application process comes with an administrative burden. It comes with time before this board. It imposes a burden on the applicants. And so whether we want to decide that, and it's frankly not equitable, right? When it's a request-based and kind of, well, when it's a by request as opposed to just kind of a built-in thing, that waivers should be for truly exceptional circumstances, not 50% of applications or of special events. And so I think if we want to consider implementing just default reduced fees for certain types of events, or if we want to say, no, it's got to be truly exceptional circumstances for there to be a waiver, but would like to set the policy clearly enough that waivers are, in fact, a truly rare thing, not the general rule, or not 50% of events.
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
I think it's difficult to do that because a lot of these are events that are free to the public, and they're basically volunteers that are operating them, and they improve the quality of life for people. Many of them don't really cost us anything, so I don't know, maybe the wording could be changed and maybe there could be some more efficiencies, but I'm not really opposed to, if it's 50% of the activities that are free, open to the public, and improving the quality of life in town, and it's only costing us 30 grand, I don't know.
Yeah.
I agree, we should think about it, but I'm not sure that we really want to overhaul the whole thing and say no more free events because we're tight on money, because these add a lot of quality of life to the town.
To be clear, I think the policy we could choose to set is there is no fee associated with these, but make that the actual policy, not a waiver that we're processing.
I agree. We need to, to look at the time that we spend on these requests and the amount that we're actually giving up, so that maybe we take a look at all of the fees and consider a minimum amount and waive that all the time, and then just bring exceptional cases to the select board for decision, and or the town manager. So.
And that, and Doug's last point was kind of why I believe it's like, if it is just a political decision by each of us, I'm totally fine with that. I just don't like how it's been a bit ceremonial with some of them. And there was one in particular that I remember where it was someone who had been awarded a Falmouth cultural grant by the town was then requesting a fee waiver from the town. So we just gave out money, and then they're requesting a fee waiver, we gave them money. So avoiding situations like that too, where it's, we've already, from happening, I think is important. But to echo what the vice chair said and what Doug just said, this is not a lot of money guaranteed, but we've said that about a lot of things. So just looking wherever we can is, I think, important.
All right. Anyone else?
For town manager, assistant town manager, one thing that is a consideration in the setting of many of our fees is the actual staff time in processing applications. In terms of most of these event permits, I'm assuming, or where these fee waiver requests are coming, do the set fees cover the staff costs of reviewing those applications?
Yeah, I would say no, they do not. As you all know, there's a special event working group, and that's comprised of what, Peter? 12 staff. The application process itself, is a submittal and review. So no, I would generally say no, the fees do not cover the cost.
Do you have suggestions of what we might do to streamline it and still have a similar effect?
Well, I mean, one thing we could set a certain amount that that doesn't have to come before the board, that could just be waived automatically. $300 or whatever amount we might land on. Just as one way of reducing the number of these.
I was thinking more of the policy that Ms. Goldstone had alluded to.
I'm sorry, I stepped out at the very beginning. Was there any discussion between the difference between permit and project fees versus entertainment fees, special event fees, and how the board feels about the difference between the two?
That was more about nonprofit versus events for activities that are not.
I mean, those different categories are called out in the policy. I think where we have typically seen a large number of applications is with the special event permit fees, or not large, but the vast majority of waiver requests that we get are the event permits.
If I could just add, so Heather's absolutely correct. The number of fee waivers that come before the board that are not special events are pretty small. That is where most of the money is, but also I don't know that that it's ripe for change, because we only waive fees for building projects for 100% affordable housing projects. So I mean, certainly you could revisit that, but it is a significant factor for helping to facilitate those projects that align with one of the board's top priorities. Truly, the only other fee waiver that I'm aware of that was not an affordable housing project was the YMCA.
Right.
And that was not a special event.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, we have started the discussion. Moving on to review and consider a vote to approve minutes of meetings April 6, 2026, April 7, 2026, and April 13, 2026. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any select board reports?
I did, it was great to join you at the two events as well. Member Brown and Member Goldstone, the two cultural council, and I thank the board for joining me in increasing their amount to $15,000. They had an over 70% increase in applicants this year, and we were able to help fund a number of those for next year. So thank you. I attended a tour of a green ADU in McCoy with a number of people from EOHLC and from the island. That was kind of the intersect of housing policy and wastewater policy, where they use one of those compostable toilets, and that was a very, very interesting tour. And it's a lot cheaper, and there's of course there's lots of parts of town that we will never be able to sewer just because of how remote they are. So it could be something we continue, and I know it's been a discussion in the past with the pilot program too. But it was a really fascinating tour, good intersect of housing and environment people. And I look forward to collaborating with partners across the Cape and the islands, kind of looking at this as a solution. All in total, it was a prefab ADU that was put together in 2 parts and had a compostable toilet. And I think it took like literally a month and a half to build, or less. So that's increasing turnaround in time, as well as a lot cheaper and not a lot of maintenance, which what surprised me. There's been a stigma against those kind of things, so it was really fascinating. So maybe something we should consider talking about again as we look at all these wastewater projects.
Okay. Anyone else?
I recently attended the Cape Coastal Conference, and I was not able to attend both days. I think I reported at our last meeting that I'd been there for the first day, and our coastal resilience specialist, Josh Wrigley, was going to be presenting the next day. There was also a discussion that day of I can't remember the right order of words now, but strategic planned retreat, I believe is the right combination of words, that Nantucket is in the early phases of development. They've done one public webinar and are going to be doing some other community forums. I was not able to attend the public forum, and I'm still looking for the recording of that to be posted, but it's something that I think would be really valuable for us to learn about in some way, whether that's inviting a presentation from someone from Nantucket or otherwise to hear what they are doing, how they are engaging the community, how they're thinking about funding, something like that.
I did attend that DOT meeting on the North Falmouth intersection of Route 28A and 151, and it was informative, and it's going to be about a year project, and it will likely start next year. And I didn't really hear any negative comments. I was interested to learn, Mary Harris informed me that there had been an informal survey of residents in the area that I had previously been unaware of, and that's where the original idea for the rotary at that location came from, because a lot of people felt like it would slow the traffic. And I don't remember actually hearing about that back in the day when the select board was not really interested in that rotary idea. So that was interesting, but the intersection is now just going to be improved with the signalized, the sensors in the road that if there's no cars there, the light stays green for the other direction, and it'll be improved that when first responder vehicles come, they can change the light, primarily the fire department, I think. And there's a lot of curb work, but the roadway layout pretty much stays the same. So it seems like a pretty good project.
I know we're going to be seeing Mr. Kriska coming to our next meeting, but I just want to mention I was at the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce Business After Hours event week before last, and the Steamship Authority was the host of that event, and Mr. Kriska was there. And I just think it certainly is showing a quite different mentality from the Steamship Authority with respect to interacting with the town. I think Mr. Kriska was at the first night of our town meeting. He was there at the chamber, and I think it's really a good sign going forward that the Steamship Authority wants to be a real part of the community discussion. So looking forward to. Yeah, what did he make it to the bike path?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, he actually had planned to go over to Nantucket, he told me, for the Daffodil event, and I told him about our event, and he decided to come to that one. Yeah. So looking forward to hearing him on May 4th. I also attended the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce Legislative Breakfast, and was very happy to hear Mr. Renshaw's presentation as a panelist. Falmouth is getting a lot of publicity with respect to what we have done, with respect to housing and what we are planning to do in the future. So, Mr. Renshaw, thank you for being there and talking up Falmouth's experience. Thank you.
If I could just mention one more thing. You know, the MPO meeting I attended last month, we talked about the project that Mashpee's doing, the shared use path. That's like $2 million, I think, and that's a TIP project. And I asked if they could add a little on to the Falmouth side, because it seems such a shame that that terminates right at a little wooded area, only a couple hundred yards from the fairground, which seems like it would be a pretty good destination. And I hope we can maybe consider a project. I know we just talked about not having more projects, but I would love to see us get a little path to complete that, because it looks like it's going to look pretty silly when it's finished. So I hope we can think of something there.
Okay. And then just on the future agenda items, just because I have my month left, if we could discuss, and this is again related to finance, the 10-year, or the kind of looking at the 10-year spending on consultant fees. I'll live if we don't talk about some of these, but that was one I would like to talk about if possible. As well as, and again, I understand if it doesn't happen, but I think this board is, all its members has taken a stance that 40B is not working for our town, and I think we should consider writing a letter to our legislators and the governor on that. So I would like to be a part of that if possible. Thank you.
Didn't we already agree on that?
Yeah, we agreed on it, but we have to actually do
We have to do it.
I'm asking to do it in the next month.
Okay.
He's gonna draft.
And just do everything in the next couple of weeks.
I would be happy to work with Mr. Richardson on a draft of that.
All right, then. Entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Good meeting. Thank you.
Hosting services for FCTV.org are provided by MegaNet Communications. MegaNet offers a wide array of internet services, including Mega Backup Cloud Service, server colocation, T1, fiber, Metro Ethernet, as well as telephone services such as hosted PBX and digital voice. Their number one goal is to keep your communications network up and running and allow you to focus on growing your business. 877-634-2638 or meganet.net.
Proudly serving the New England area, K&K Talent Partners provide a personalized approach to full-cycle recruiting services.
Their level of integrity and empathy is rare, and it speaks volumes about who they are as people and as recruitment partners.
Our goal is to build trusted relationships and to create genuine connections that help companies grow.
K&K Talent Partners, kktalentpartners.com.
At Martha's Vineyard Bank, we know Falmouth, with locations in Woods Hole, on Palmer Avenue, and the Village Green. We deliver personal banking tailored to your needs, business solutions to help you grow, flexible lending to move you forward, and investment strategies that work for you. Whatever brings you in, we're your local partner. Martha's Vineyard Bank, your goals, our guidance.
Falmouth Select Board Chair Bob Miscali and Town Manager Mike Renshaw are recapping Select Board meetings on FCTV's newest series, Select Board Report. Watch new episodes of Select Board Report Thursdays, live at 5, at fctv.org or on YouTube. Have a question about what happened at the last Select Board meeting? Ask our host by visiting fctv.org/watch/SBR.